If you have been watching the news at all, you might have heard something about how the Bank of Japan is ending its negative interest rate policy and is moving the nation's economy onto a new footing. You might be wondering what that even means. And because it's about Japan, I'm sure your first question is, how will this impact the anime industry? Macroeconomics is an inexact science at the best of times, and so much less sexy than microeconomics, but I will take a stab at guessing. Since the end of the 80s, the Japanese economy has been on a general trend of economic contraction and monetary deflation, with pretty dire impacts on Japanese society. And the Bank of Japan has been inventing new forms of monetary policy to try to do something about it. They were the first to engage in direct bond purchases at the zero lower bound, aka quantitative easing. That's the money printer you've heard so much about. Yet the Japanese economy is so moribund, QE didn't produce any economic growth or even cause the yen to inflate. Yes, Japan clearly has fundamental non-monetary problems that need answering, but this is about just what the central bank can do. It's up to the Diet and the Prime Minister to create new labor regulations, and tell the Japanese people they need to engage in unprotected, qualitative pleasing. Speaking of, it was under Shinzo Abe's leadership, when his promised magical fixes for the economy failed to materialize, that the bank implemented negative interest rates, charging banks money for keeping reserves instead of loaning them out, which still failed to actually get money moving around Japan. What actually seems to have given Japan a good knock upside the head was the pandemic. With the various economic disruptions, especially in food, the yen has experienced sustained inflation for the first time in a while, and it has gotten locked in, as large companies have been answering union requests for raises, significantly increasing cash flow in the economy, with the goal of greater money velocity fulfilled, if not by their action. The BOJ has signaled that they will begin moving their interest rates back into the positive and scaling back their quantitative easing programs after decades of unorthodox monetary policy. The question is, how has this and how will this impact the anime industry? In any country, the entertainment industry is always a little recession resistant, and Japan is no exception. In my idealized Homo economicus imagination, what you would see is GDP rising and falling interest rates 3 to 5 years before my favorite anime came out. Lower interest leads to more investment. More investments means more anime, granting a few years time lag for planning and production before release. Obviously, shit was popping in the 80s, along with the entire Japanese economy. But after that, it's pretty hard to find any real correlation. Nobody would accuse the early 2010s of being an exceptionally weak or unprolific period for anime, and yet it was preceded by a few years of higher than usual interest rates and recession due to the global financial crisis. Studio Madhouse and Gainax disintegrated around that time, but there's a lot of documentation to point to mismanagement in those cases, as opposed to lack of work or investment. I think where you might be able to find the most measurable macroeconomic impacts on the anime industry is in the exchange rate of the yen. It's no secret that a lot of anime production, especially in-between frames or off episodes of super long-running series, get outsourced to studios in other countries like Korea, Vietnam, China, or the Philippines. So it stands to reason that the relative savings on outsourcing, or the amount that outsourcing studios get paid, would be influenced by the buying power of the yen in those markets. For instance, Vietnamese names have made a regular appearance in anime credits for a while now, but versus the 2010s, in the past few years the exchange rate of the yen to the dong has dropped by something like 20%. Similar numbers when you look at the Korean won or the Pinoy peso. When you see a show like One Piece, where Toei reportedly makes 2/3 of the show in the Philippines, you have to wonder if there's a noticeable impact of the show effectively costing 10 or 15% more to produce than before, or the lives of some Filipino animators getting 10 or 15% worse, though I'm sure that happens every day. Some people might celebrate that anime studios will no longer outsource jank to gaijin, but when you look at things like the multinational productions of Science Saru, it's clear that foreign support isn't always just a way to shit things out the door. At time of writing, there is a lot of uncertainty as to which directions the yen and the other Pacific currencies will go, in large part thanks to the current vagaries of the American economy. If the yen were to gain strength now, that likely implies domestic Japanese inflation as well and some attendant economic shocks. But anime studios may have increased foreign buying power. If the yen continues to lose strength, we might see reduced outsourcing and possibly contraction in anime productions in general, though there will also be an increase in buying power from Western-backed productions and consumers. So like any honest economic analysis, all I can really say is, I don't know what's going to happen. I guess we just have to wait and see.